Yeah.
Was
Can I just put a 22 on the end of it? We'll call it good.
Good evening. Welcome to the Oregon City Council regular meeting. This is February the 14th, 2022, and the time now is 7 o'clock. Please stand with me so we can start the meeting to order with the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
The only person walled off here. Yeah, I'm the only one walled off here. I didn't.
It's the dome of silence.
The cone of silence.
The cone of silence.
The cone of silence. We're gonna call it the wall of silence.
Ms. Evans,
The wall of
would you take a roll call of council, please?
Mr. Davish?
Here.
Mr. Drake?
Here.
Mr. Horniak?
Here.
Mrs. Powell? Here. Mr. Reeves?
Here.
Mr. Wallenzek?
Here.
Mr. Zale?
Here. And also for the record, also attending tonight is Mayor Michael J. Safarian, City Administrator Michael Beasley, Clerk of Council Tina Evans, Law Director Melissa Papura, Public Service Director Paul Roman, Fire Chief Dennis Hartman, Assistant Fire Chief Paul Mullins, and Commissioner of Rec Mark Mullins, I'm sorry. And Commissioner of Rec Tim Bort. Council, first order of business tonight would be the approval of the meeting minutes for January the 24th, 2022, regular meeting.
Mr. President,
Mr. Reeves,
I move to approve the minutes from the January 24th, 2022 regular council meeting.
Thank you,
as
Mr. Reeves.
presented.
Second.
second by Mr. Davish. Thank you, Mr. Davish. Are there any objections, council? Hearing none, we have approved the meeting minutes for January 24th, 2022. Also, council, since we did not have a committee of the whole meeting last week, we need to add items 14 and 15 and 17 through 26 to today's agenda. Item 16 is going to be omitted for this meeting because there are some changes that need to be made and probably be presented next.
Mr. President,
Mr. Reeves?
I move to add those items as presented.
Thank you, Mr. Reeves.
Second.
Second by Mr. Drake. Thank you, Mr. Drake. Council, any objections to that? Items 14 and 15 and 17 through 26 will be added to this week's agenda. First item up today is item 14, 2022, presented by Mayor Michael J. Safarian and Finance Director Darlene Huntermark.
In the absence of Darlene being out of town, we're going to put Mike Beasley in a skirt and let him respond.
Mr. Beasley.
Mr. President, members, just as a note, as the members know, for a number of years, we have some program income that the state of Ohio EDA administers for us on this. We do have two different funds. At some point, as folks know, we cooperate with the county on our CHIP and other housing program. At some point, we are going to be looking during the course of this year, we kind of put it off during COVID time, to perhaps do some things on our with small business opportunities by partnering with the Port Authority and their loan fund to see if we can get some additional leverage on it. So we'll be bringing in subsequent legislation on that after we look at some different ways of shaping that. This will just continue the partnership with the state where they administer our fund.
Thank you, Mr. Beasley. Council, any comments or questions? Hearing none, I will assign item 14 as ordinance 14, 2022, and ask Ms. Evans to read it into the record.
Authorizing the mayor and finance director to enter into an agreement with the State of Ohio Department of Development for the administration of the Housing Revolving Loan Fund and declaring an emergency.
Council.
Mr.
Go
ahead.
Mr. Horniak.
I move for passage of ordinance 14 of 22 as an emergency measure.
Thank you, Mr. Horniak.
Second.
Second by Mr. Davish. Thank you, Mr. Davish. Ms. Evans, would you take a roll of council, please?
Mr. Horniak?
Yes.
Mr. Davish?
Yes.
Mr. Drake?
Yes.
Mrs. Powell?
yes,
Mr. Reeves?
Yes.
Mr. Wallenzek?
Yes.
Mr. Zale?
Yes. Thank you, council. Ordinance 14, 2022 passes by 7 yeas and 0 nays. Our next item will be item 15, 2022, also presented by Mayor Michael J. Safarian and Commissioner of Parks and Recreation, Tim Borton. I think we'll just defer to Tim. Mr. Borton?
Thank you, Mr. President. This is just a renewal of our contract with the Independent Umpires Association. They provide all of our umpiring services for baseball, softball, all of our events where we have officials are either coordinated and scheduled through them, or we pay through them for all our officials. And this contract is good through the end of 2023.
Thank you, Mr. Borton. I know this doesn't really affect us that much with this, but do they anticipate a shortage of umpires this year? It sounds like everywhere you hear this, they can't find anybody to do it.
Yeah, and then in the contract, we worked on the numbers to try and get them to a point where we hope that umpires are willing to come out for the pay that we're offering. From talking to the IUA leadership, they also schedule a lot of the high school baseball, softball games, and they said a lot of those games are probably only going to have one official at even the high school JV freshman level. So for our events, most of these are based on with the assumption that we're going to have one official per contest, not two that we've had in the past.
Thank you, Mr. Borton.
Mr.
Council
President,
Mr. Reeves?
Mr. Borton, did the price go up this
Yes.
year? How significant?
They went up like $5 to $7 a game,
Okay.
depending on the age group.
Yeah, I know they came to us at the high school level asking for quite a bit of more money as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Reeves.
Mr. President,
Mr. Drake?
I don't think this mic works.
You gotta
You
pull
can
it,
hear me anyway.
pull it closer.
Yes, we can.
Tim, I have a question. Do the umpires get background checked?
Yeah, we included that, and if you read through the contract, you'll see that that's in there. A few years ago, it just used to be through the police department. We have just started this year with a group called NCIS that does background checks, and we'll get that information to the umpires, where they'll get a link. They have to provide them some information, and then we'll get a report back on. And we're doing the same thing for our coaches, basically, who's cleared and who has some red flags that we need to look into. But there will be a background check.
Okay, and also, is there a safe sport, anything like that?
We don't have a safe sport training. Is that what you're talking about? I think that's through like Special Olympics does that and some others.
Actually, USA softball does it.
Okay,
All coaches, umpires have to do it.
right.
It's just awareness of misconduct and stuff like that.
I know some of our leagues, like in soccer and stuff, there has already been a push for that for for soccer, for example. It's not in here yet for baseball, softball, but that is something we'll look into.
Okay, and then the coaches also do that.
Yeah, the coaches will
Same
do the background check. Correct.
Not through a local.
Correct. It'll be a national search now is what we're moving towards.
Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Drake. Thank you, Mr. Borton. Council, any other comments or questions? Hearing none, I will, assign item 15, 2022 as ordinance 15, 2022, and ask Ms. Evans to read it in the record.
Authorizing the mayor, finance director, and commissioner of recreation and parks to enter into an agreement with the Oregon Officials Association, also known as the Independent Umpires Association of Northwest Ohio, to officiate athletic events scheduled by the Oregon Parks and Recreation Department.
Council,
Mr. President,
Mr. Reeves?
thank you. I move to approve ordinance 15 of 2022.
Thank you, Mr. Reeves.
Second,
Mr. Drake, thank you. Mr. Drake, second. Ms. Evans, you take a roll of council, please.
Mr. Reeves,
Yes.
Mr. Drake,
yes.
Mr. Davish,
Yes.
Mr. Horniak,
Yes.
Mrs. Pollock,
yes,
Mr. Wallenzeck,
Yes.
Mr. Zale,
Yes, thank you, council. Ordinance 15, 2022 passes with 7 yeas and 0 nays. Next item will be item 17, 2022. I will also defer to Mr. Borton on this item.
Similar to the IUA, this is something that every year we have to acquire the services of porta pots throughout the city. In 2020, we started having additional porta pots along our grounds and inside our Parks and Rec grounds, and that was popular. People like the fact that they were a little bit closer than walking to the bathrooms. In addition to this, if you look at the proposal, it provides the porta pots for Boom Fest if we were to do that this year. The farmers market that takes place, those are factored in here. So most of the porta pot needs for the city are factored into this quote. We did request 3 quotes. One company chose not to bid, and that was Coman out of the White House area. And they basically didn't bid because we prefer to pay with dump tickets, which is more of an exchange of services than an actual dollar amount. And they would prefer just to be paid in cash, which ends up costing more. So Ace was the winning bidder because they were willing to take the dump tickets, and also they were less expensive than the other one who did bid for the total of the $33,825. That will be paid in dump tickets, and we kind of portion those out throughout the year that we give those to the company, and they take those to the wastewater plant to dump their trucks. So it's more of an exchange of service than an actual dollar amount.
Thank you, Mr. Borton. Council, any comments or questions? Hearing none, I will assign item 17, 2022 as ordinance 17, 2022, and ask Ms. Evans to read it into the record.
Authorizing the mayor, finance director, and commissioner of recreation and parks to enter into an agreement with Ace Diversified Services LLC, 1750 Trade Road, Holland, Ohio, for portable restroom facilities for the 2022 season in exchange for waste tickets to be used at the city's wastewater treatment plant in the amount of $33,825 and declaring an emergency.
Council,
Mr. President,
Mr. Reeves,
thank you. I move to approve ordinance 17 of 2022 as an emergency measure.
thank you, Mr. Reeves. Second by Mr. Horniak. Ms. Evans, you take a roll call, please.
Mr. Reeves?
Yes.
Mr. Horniak?
Yes.
Mr. Davish?
Yes.
Mr. Drake?
Yes.
Mrs. Pollock?
yes,
Mr. Wallenzak?
Yes.
Mr. Zale?
Yes. Thank you, Council. Ordinance 17, 2022 passes with 7 yeas and 0 nays. Next item is item 18, 2022, presented by Mayor Michael J. Safarian and Fire Chief Dennis Hartman, and I will defer to Chief Hartman.
Okay, this is just pretty standard stuff. We have to obviously have EMS supplies throughout the year. And we, along with the Lucas County EMS system, have gone out and got the best, the lowest and best bid for all of our medical supplies. If there's any questions about that, Mark pretty much takes care of this. I'm sure he can answer any questions. Otherwise, it's just pretty standard stuff for the first of the year.
Thank you, Chief. Council, any questions or comments? Hearing none, I will assign item 18, 2022 as ordinance 18, 2022, and ask Ms. Evans to read it into the roll or into the record, please.
Authorizing the mayor and finance director to enter into a purchase agreement with Boundtree Medical LLC, 5000 Tuttle Crossing Boulevard, Dublin, Ohio, for the purpose of purchasing medical supplies for the EMS and Life Squad units during 2022 and declaring an emergency.
Council,
Mr. President.
Ms. Pauloff,
I move for passage of ordinance number 18 of 2022 and declaring an emergency.
thank you, Ms. Pauloff.
Second.
Mr. Davish, second. Thank you. Ms. Evans, would you take a roll call vote of council, please?
Mrs. Pollock?
Yes,
Mr. Davish?
Yes.
Mr. Drake?
Yes.
Mr. Horniak?
Yes.
Mr. Reeves?
Yes.
Mr. Wallenzak?
Yes.
Mr. Zale?
Yes, thank you, council. Ordinance 18, 2022 passes by 0 or 7 yeas and 0 nays. Next item is item 19, 2022, also presented by Mayor Michael J. Safarian and Fire Chief Dennis Hartman. Chief?
In order to operate an emergency medical service, you must have what's called medical direction. In other words, we all operate under a medical director's license. They have to sign all of the pharmacy license, et cetera, and provide that provides us with the protocols to operate with and the oversight for that. And so we have in the past, for the past few years, been with the Premier Physician Services, and we actually have kind of a continuation contract, but we do like to bring it before council every year.
Thank you, Chief. Just one question. Is this services, are these through Mercy, or is this through ProMedica, or is it separate from both of those?
These are all generally Mercy doctors, work for the Mercy healthcare system, but they are their own physicians group. So we contract with the physicians group. It's kind of a national. Obviously, these are out of, or their offices are out of New Jersey, but these are all local doctors. They're local, working in the surrounding emergency rooms.
Thank you, Chief. Council, any other questions or comments? Hearing none, I will sign item 19, 2022 as ordinance 19, 2022, and ask Ms. Evans to read it in the record.
Authorizing the mayor and finance director to enter into an agreement with Premier Physician Services Incorporated, 307 South Evergreen Avenue, Woodbury, New Jersey, for medical director services at a cost of $8,365 for the period of February 1, 2022 through December 31, 2024, and declaring an emergency.
Council?
Mr. President,
Ms. Pauloff?
I move for passage of ordinance number 19 of 2022 and declaring an emergency.
Thank you, Ms. Pauloff.
Second.
Second by Mr. Davish. Ms. Evans, would you take a roll call vote of council, please?
Mrs. Powell?
Yes.
Mr. Davish?
Yes.
Mr. Drake?
Yes.
Mr. Horniak?
Yes.
Mr. Reeves?
Yes.
Mr. Wallensack?
Yes.
Mr. Zale?
Yes, thank you, council. Ordinance 19, 2022 passes with 7 yeas and 0 nays. Next item is item 20, 2022, also presented by Mayor Michael J. Safarian and Fire Chief Dennis Hart. Chief?
Again, this is a standard contract to have our radio equipment maintained and repaired as needed. That includes batteries and those kind of things. And we're very happy to have this be a local, there's a local store here within, I don't know, less than a mile of the fire station. And it works out very well, and we're very happy with the continued service.
Thank you, Chief. Council, any questions or comments? Hearing none, I will assign item 2022 as ordinance 2022 and ask Ms. Evans to read it into the record.
Authorizing the mayor and finance director to enter into a service agreement contract with P&R Communications Service Incorporated, 731 East First Street, Dayton, Ohio, for the service and maintenance of portable and portable radios for the City of Oregon Fire and Rescue Department and declaring an emergency.
Council?
Mr. President,
Ms. Pauloff?
I move for passage of ordinance number 20 of 2022 and declaring an emergency.
Thank you, Ms. Pauloff.
Second.
Second by Mr. Davish. Thank you, Mr. Davish. Ms. Evans, will you take a vote of council, please?
Mrs. Powell?
Yes.
Mr. Davish?
Yes.
Mr. Drake?
Yes.
Mr. Horniak?
Yes.
Mr. Reeves?
Yes.
Mr. Wallensack? Mr. Zale?
Yes. Thank you, council. Ordinance 2022 passes by 7 yeas and 0 nays. Next item will be item 21, 2022, which will be presented by Councilman Paul Drake.
I spoke with Paul Roman.
Tina, I don't know if you can put that map up.
Can
Can you put it up? It's a little bar. Oh,
Oh, look at that.
you know what? Yeah, who's that guy?
It's the younger Paul Roman.
Well, so I don't have
High school
the map
graduation
out
photo.
back up, Paul, but I can go through our other projects.
Okay, that's fine.
Okay.
That'll-
And so, Mr. President, Council, and Mr. Drake, I know a couple weeks ago, we did approve a design contract with Manikin Smith.
Right.
And that was we received a $1.3 million grant from the US EPA. And so we had the map. And it was attached to the Mannequin Smith, but you don't, when you see a conceptual map, you don't really see the features that you just don't realize it until you build it, you know? And I think through the years, we've done a lot of wetland mitigation. And I think when you do mitigation, you're doing it because you have some other civil works project and you have to mitigate. And when you do that, you have to provide, so when you do a stream mitigation, for every foot you take out, you have to provide 1.5 feet more of wetland. And when we started the projects, Big Ditch on Stadium Road through our Veterans Park there was one of our first projects. I think when we did it, people realized that, boy, this is a great rec project. They didn't realize it was mitigation, and you realized how attractive it was. And we got better. So that was our first mitigation. And then we went to the Oregon flood relief, which was another mitigation. It was the ditch along Lynn Road. The road was caving in. And Amlash ditch went through the middle of BP Husky. If you looked at that ditch, you know, they had riprap on each side. The tanks were encroaching on it. Very low quality wetlands. And when you look at what we did for Oregon flood relief, we took the stream that was going through a refinery and we went around the refinery. And, you know, the Big Ditch project to get a permit from the Army Corps took us 4.5 years, which is a long time. And for Oregon flood relief, it took about 3 years. And, but those are mitigation projects. And then we moved on to actually building wetlands and the urban runoff project we did in what's called Euclid Park, Old Eastmoreland. And if council recalls, we took about 2/3 of the drainage that was going straight to Otter Creek, and we routed it through created wetlands alongside Otter Creek. So, and what's unique about Euclid Park, Old Eastmoreland, is there's hills there. It has fall, so you can actually have the gravity flow work on your behalf. Everywhere else in the city, it's like a pancake, super flat. So, so if you, and I want to say this too, is as much as we're good at doing the things we do, we're not as great at marketing what we do, you know? So, you know, and I think that's a flaw, and we have some really cool things, and it's available on the city website, but nobody really knows to go there. And so I thought when Mr. Drake asked us to do this, one thing I could show just in general, if you go to the City of Oregon website, you go to the Public Service Department, and you go to Public Service Projects. So that's what we hit right here. And you'll see all our projects. And one of the first, I mentioned the urban runoff Otter Creek Restoration Project. I'll show you the first, gosh, I'm blind here looking at this thing. I can show you the conceptual plan first, which is this right here. And this was, you know, here's Sylvandale, and, you know, Otter Creek is over here. This is the conceptual plan. We took the drainage from this neighborhood and we routed it through a pipe, through this forebay, and into our area. Now, Tina, if for me to go back to the website, how do I do that? Up here?
You just hit that arrow up there, it'll go back.
Where?
To the far left. All the way to the left.
All the way to the left.
Yeah, right there.
All right, Aaron.
He's probably on a different screen.
Far left top,
Left.
Where?
There you go.
public service project.
Okay, all right, that'll work. All right, thank you. All right, so then this is a drone, and we'll have to get to skip the commercial here. Hold on. I don't know how I get rid of that, dismiss that. All right, so this is what we created, and this is, you know, and Don, we have a drone that we now fly for our projects. What's interesting, the drone, even if there's a flood and we want to know how well something performed, we can fly the drone right after the rain event and we can see a lot of things. But this is what you have in your own backyard, and I think a lot of people didn't know what to expect. When we talk about putting in a bank, a lower bank area, this is Otter Creek, and you put in a lower bank, this is what you'll see, okay? And, you know, you don't see the flowers right now. It's not the prettiest thing, but you will see times throughout the year, you'll see quite a bit. And even in our, and I'll speed this up so that we don't have to go through the whole thing. Hold on a sec. And this is, I think, going towards, there's a Mr. Phillips lives right here. He was an older gentleman that would cut this park before we did anything. He had his own doubts in what we did, and he thinks it's beautiful. And he's actually counting the people for us that come and visit and take a look at it, you know, so, and that's the part, this is Old Eastmoreland Boulevard at the dead end. And if you recall, they weren't connected, so we did connect that with this grant. And like I said, it really is attractive to see this. When the 2 times I've been out there, you see a lot of birds in the water. It's the same ones there each time I go. You know, it really is attractive. So.
Those aren't sound effects, those are real birds, so you know.
Attacking the drone.
And then I'll let it get a little bit. And, you know, I think too, and I'll show you with the Oregon flood relief is a really cool video as well. All right. And then just, I know it's slow and I apologize for that, but you'll see the walking paths. These are, when you take drainage and you slow it down to a super slow velocity, what'll happen is sediment will drop out. So if there's nutrients, they're going to drop out with the sediment, and the plants that you have there will absorb those nutrients, okay? And even in shallow water, even the sunlight, if there's E. coli or anything else in the water, the sunlight will kill the E. coli. And it's literally a natural treatment. So this is the forebay, the storm sewer that comes in. This is the first place that it goes. All your sediment and things drop out. And this is a little bit deeper of a pool. They're all gradual slopes in. It's not like it's dangerous or anything, but it is the deeper pool. So let me go back. And so
Thank you,
that
Mr.
was,
Roman. Do we routinely check the area and our other areas
oh
for
yeah,
invasive
yeah,
species
quite a bit.
of
I don't know
plants?
what this music is here. That's not me. So, okay. All right. I don't know what that's from. How do I kill this?
Switch tabs.
I did that. This one?
Or hit the. Gotta hit the speaker, hit the little speaker and it'll mute it to the right.
There you go.
How about I do that?
There you go.
All right. Sorry about that.
So the question I had for you, I think you heard it. Do we routinely check these areas for invasive species of plants and
Oh, yeah.
take care
Yeah,
of that?
yeah. Well, so just like on the mitigation projects, you're required to meet the Army Corps' goals. You submit the goals that you want to meet, and there has to be goals that they accept. So you are going to provide a much higher quality wetlands, and you have 5 years to meet those goals. Now, I can tell you on the next video, I'll show you on the Oregon flood relief, we actually provided more acreage than what we were required to do. And you think you're doing a good thing, but the problem is Army Corps, they don't care. Whatever you say you're going to provide, you better provide that. So I almost regretted saying we're going to do all this more. If you can't meet it, you're in trouble. Well, we met our water quality by the 3rd year, but because of the lake and the sage effect, that, you know, when the lake rises, it would flood out all our plants in the first quarter mile. So we were almost 2 acres short of meeting our goal, even though we provided 12 more acres more than what we needed. That's, you know, no good deed goes unpunished. I think that was a problem. Now, because of our higher water quality and because of everything else we did, they knew Army Corps definitely worked with us, as well as the EPA, and they did give us full approval. We have met our goals for the Oregon flood relief, and it is attractive. Let me make sure I got the right one. Yeah.
One quick question for you, Paul.
Mhm.
What was our role of involvement years ago when they did that wetlands project over at Maumee Bay State Park near North Curse? We had some kind of role in that. Did we not?
For Maumee Bay State Park, other than what's in the city, which is the campgrounds, we didn't have much involvement.
Well,
with-
I thought we did some work south of Cedar Point.
Yeah,
That,
behind our
that
plant.
fed into that.
Oh,
Work behind our
oh, yeah, our
facility,
wastewater plant, yeah.
Yeah.
our water treatment plant.
Yeah. Well, yeah, that's another project. Yeah, that's, well, I wish, let me,
Because that was like one of the first ones we got involved.
yeah, let me,
Actually, no.
it was real simple. We partnered, you're right, with UT, at University of Toledo. And they had a treatment system within the park. Burger Ditch is what Wolf Creek goes into. And as Burger Ditch goes in there, they had a side treatment system that would use, they routed the water underground and plants' roots. The idea was plant roots would absorb the nutrients. But they didn't want to overload their system. So they came to us and said, well, what could we do? Could we provide something that would remove a lot of the heavier sediment? So we put a belly in Wolf Creek. So right before the water plant in Wolf Creek, we put a belly. I think just by us putting in the belly, we were removing sediment and reducing the loads before we even got to UT's system. And I think from that alone, we learned just widening, and like this is really 3 systems: Heckman, Driftmeyer, and Amlash Ditch routed through one system, but it's a super wide channel, 10 times the normal, okay? But again, it'll handle a lot of flow, but at a very small velocity. And at a very small velocity, sediment drops out. And again, when we first started here, this is the lake level controlling. So a lot of it, you just see water. But as you go further, you'll see the plants, and even with the plants, you'll see it gets clear. You see some birds in here and so on. It really is attractive. But that's the concept of over widening channels. Now, what we do out back, we'll create shelves, and I mentioned to Mr. Drake that we'll have a boardwalk so that you can walk and see exactly what we're doing in the plants. The grant requires us to have an education portion where we'll include Clay High School. We'll have the rec department as a stakeholder. I think there's a lot of master planning involved with that, where I know the mayor would love to have Boom Fest out back, and I think when we do our project out back, we'll have a lot of dirt. Question is, do we create a mound? Do we create a viewing hill of some sort, with all the other mounds that we have out back? Do we grow alfalfa in the fields so that we can park cars, that type of master planning we need to do with the rec, just so you know. And, in this going through this thing, you'll start seeing the birds. And again, the further this is, going south, further you get away, you'll start seeing the plugs. The portion that we didn't meet was this area where it was constantly flooded, and they did give us a break on that. But as you go through here, you'll start to see more plants and plugs and so on. I can speed it up if you want. All right here. These are the plugs down in there, and it is a really attractive. And again, we have all this. Now, how many people go out there and get out of Wind Road? The Eagles Landing is over here. The VP Husky's on the other side. I don't know if anyone goes and walks and look at this. We always wanted to build a walking path up on the hill, and I think it's just a matter of budget to do something like that. And maybe you try to get another grant. This is Cedar Point Road right here. That's the bridge, and it'll turn around. To me, if you could just get people to go to our website, look at this, and play around with this footage, you'd see how cool it is. But it's even better to actually go out and see it, really. And even I think the urban runoff over at Old Eastmoreland. It's easy. It's an easy walk. It really is a neighborhood park. It wasn't intended for the entire city to go there, but quite honestly, it's an easy walk to walk a dog real quick, So that's it.
Thank you, Mr. Rowan.
Mr. President,
Mr. Mayor.
and as you brought up about the project we had behind our water treatment plant, when that project did open, Marcy Captor came out here for that coordination of that event, and she recognized the city of Oregon as like the innovators of projects like this through the ones we had done. And even though it's nice we sit up here, take credit, but really, Mr. Roman's department, the engineering department, really deserves all the kudos because they were the leaders in this. So we got most of our ditch systems pre-treating the affluent going out into the lake. And we were years ahead of the time when it will be a requirement. And like I said, I think that's when Marcy Kaptur recognized the city of Oregon as the innovators of these programs. We're blessed with having the outlets to the lake, but we are also kind of plagued with cities upstream from us dumping whatever into making it our responsibility to take care of whatever they were doing. And we not only had that problem with the storm sewer, but with wastewater also. I have to really give kudos to Mr. Roman and his department because they've been keeping us ahead of the time.
And if I
Thank you,
could,
Mayor.
Mr. President, and I'd like to just recognize, Don Nelson. He's an environmental specialist. Don is a biologist, and he has really advanced clearly in his knowledge of the things we do. Definitely watched over the mitigation projects. I dealt a lot with the Army Corps permits and the engineering side, but Don dealt with a lot of the wetland creation and just a lot of the maintenance of it. I guess, again, dealing with invasive species. We've had tree planting projects that Don's been a part of. But I think going after this $1.3 million grant, a lot of that was Don. And he really did do a great job on that. Not many people get that size of a grant. And he did quite a bit for it. So that's it.
Thank you, Mr. Roman. Council, any other comments or questions?
Mr. President.
Ms. Paula?
Paul, thank you for bringing this resolution forward. Excuse me. Reading the resolution, it states that the city will work to preserve existing wetlands. And I understand all of this work, and kudos to Paul's department. I really do think that they've really done a great job with it. With this, I want to make sure that I understand, when you say wetlands in Oregon, there are a lot of wetlands on private property. So this isn't going to have any finance end for repairing people's wetlands and stuff like that, is it?
No, I believe, Mr. President, Ms. Paula, that this resolution is recognizing the benefit of wetlands and trying to preserve what wetlands we have now. We do mitigation when we have to, but the idea is to avoid mitigation altogether, not touch wetlands if you don't have to. Now, that's easy for me to say when we're doing public works projects on a private property. Even with that, you'd want to encourage an owner not to take out the wetlands,
Right, but my point is this, there are programs that private property residents can get into.
Oh, yeah,
through the
and create their own, yeah.
H2O Ohio
Yep.
and the Federal Department of Natural
Yep,
Resources.
yep.
So, I mean, can we give that information if people want to call and
Yeah,
look for it?
Well,
For them to do it for their own private property as well?
yeah, I think, and again, it wouldn't take much other than getting on the web and searching that info out. I'd say farmers have done buffers, natural buffers along a waterway, and they get paid so much not to grow anything in those buffers. You've had other people create wetlands, and one of the first things they do is they crush all the tiles. Another interesting thing, Pearson Park, that North Pearson, if you didn't know this, North Pearson really is a mitigation bank. It was created by Ohio Wetlands. One of the first thing they did was they crushed all the field tile, okay? And then they did their project. They put in a lot of plantings, but Ohio Wetlands was created by the Ohio Builders Association, which they were building subdivisions and would need mitigation credits. And that's how that got started. But it's grown. It's a nonprofit, but it's grown in what they do. And that's 200 some acres of a mitigation bank. But yeah, there's a lot of reasons for creating it. You may create it for your own, for your own enjoyment. But yeah, a lot of that's available on the web. You can create buffers and get grant dollars for that. And I don't know, I've never done it. I don't know any better. I don't know if anyone else here has. But yeah, those programs are out there. Yeah, I think it's to encourage it. And even, again, look at when people even build homes, they all want to route their downspout through a pipe straight to the storm sewer. And to me, it's like, no, discharge it onto the grass, let that sediment infiltrate, let it infiltrate into the yard before it goes straight to this system and out. I loved, detention ponds because I like wet ponds because they collect the sediment versus going straight to the storm sewer, straight out to the lake. That's what we promote. And it's hard. Some people don't want that. They don't want that pipe discharging onto the grass. They hate it. And just like these wetlands, I think when we did the wetlands on Big Ditch up in Veterans Park, a lot of the calls were, hey, when are you going to cut those weeds? People would call and complain. And you say, well, they're not weeds, they're wetlands. And, oh, no, those are weeds. When are you going to cut them? And they get all upset that we're not cutting them.
Well, that's why I would like to see more of that going to residents who have private property that they might want to turn into, some type of wetland, especially in, with those with bigger lots and bigger properties.
Yeah, I can tell you that the encouragement is even greater for, like, if you ever go to so just go into Google Maps and just following Wolf Creek through the city, you'll see all these private ponds completely encroaching on the creek itself. It really chokes it off. And they don't, and we don't have any easements. We have no control over that. And that's a crime in itself, But yeah, if you could widen the creek, and force land runoff to go through a buffer. The thing about, you read a lot of information about buffer, it applies more in an area where you have fall. We don't have fall. We're flat. So there's a lot of tiles that drain our lands. That's all there is to it,
Well, I don't want to give you any more work because I know you've got a lot of work on your plate, a lot going on. But if there's a way that we could get that information out there for residents to, be aware of little things like that, like, with rainwater and with allowing grass to grow to the tall grasses and stuff.
Oh, yeah.
We get that information out there, they'll understand better and could add more to it.
No, I appreciate it.
Thank you, Ms. Paula. Thank you, Mr. Roman. Council, any other questions or comments?
Mr. President, I got one more question.
Mr. Drake.
For Paul. Paul, a citizen sent me something they read in the Toledo newspaper. Toledo was awarded like $400,000 from the EPA. They're objects they put in ditches that collect trash
Yeah,
before they go to the lake.
You have a net that collects them.
So I didn't know if Mr. Nelson.
Yeah, so Mr. Drake, Mr. President, we learned of that after they got the award. And once we saw that, oh, wow, we should go after that too. It's like a netting system that collects it. Now, hopefully they'll maintain it and, keep, clean that out. But yeah, it's a netting that connects physical objects from going straight up to the lake.
Okay.
Yep.
And one last question. I know the video there in Old Eastmoreland. I grew up in that neighborhood and a lot of residents I've talked to love it there. Is there any thought? I know Otter Creek, I know a couple residents that live down by that old water park on Wheeling Street. If there's any way, I don't know if there's any other land where they could make the wetlands so those people don't get flooded.
Well, and again, don't be fooled that by what we're doing is going to stop flooding. Okay, because Otter Creek is a natural floodplain. Okay, just so you know, it's very low in elevation. I mean, Otter Creek is a valley, believe it or not. So anything that's in that valley, the water will back up. So if we do these projects, it doesn't necessarily mean we're going to prevent flooding.
Right.
Okay.
Maybe help it.
But by like Taylor Street and Yarrow, there are other areas that we've looked at creating more wetlands. You have to get the property owners on board to do it. But there's other areas, and you're right, that the guys, so from Wheeling over to Seaman, that could be a potential area, but even north of Seaman, you know, as it wraps around, it starts heading east, due east. Actually, city of Toledo has their, line lagoons in the area by Taylor. That'd be a perfect wetland.
All right, thanks, Paul.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Drake.
Mr. President.
Mr. Mayor.
Not all of them.
Well, I was just gonna say, a good percentage of those houses that flood are built in the floodplain.
Yeah.
With the current rules and regulations, they wouldn't even be permitted to be built, but they were built prior to the regulations
Yeah,
existing.
yeah.
And so it's almost impossible for an area that's designed to flood to avoid a flood.
By nature.
Yeah, just, so you know, FEMA came out really in 70, you know, that 70, 72. And there was a huge flood in 72 and everybody was required to do master plans if you wanted any other money for drainage. The city did our master plan in 74, just, you know, and it was
So,
from
we
that
wouldn't even
flooding.
be able to be permitted to drain those areas.
Yeah.
Because they're in the flood.
And by the way, our 74 master plan was basically putting in concrete channels everywhere and making them as big as possible and routing it as fast as they could out to the lake, which I think is a mistake. I think you want to slow it down, get the sediment to drop out before going straight to the lake. And we're lucky that we have a lot of land here where we can do that. Not everybody along the lake has that available to them. Avon Lake, they're flat, but they're 30 feet up in the air. So they have all this fall. We don't, you know, we don't have any fall. See? So, yeah.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Mr. Roman. Council, are there any other questions or comments? Hearing none, I will assign item 21, 2022 as resolution 21, 2022, and ask Ms. Evans to read it in the roll or in the record.
Resolution recognizing February 2nd, 2022 is World Wetlands Day in the city of Oregon and supporting awareness of the call to action for wetlands throughout the world.
Ms. Evans, would you take a council vote, please?
Nobody.
Someone needs to make.
Oh, I'm sorry. Council? Mr. Davish?
Oh,
You want me to make it? All right.
Mr. Drake?
Mr. Sale, I move for passage of ordinance, resolution, I'm sorry, 21-2022.
Thank you, Mr. Drake.
second.
Second by Ms. Pauloff. Ms. Evans, would you take a vote of council, please?
Mr. Drake,
Yes.
Mrs. Powell,
Yes,
Mr. Davish.
Yes.
Mr. Horniak.
Yes.
Mr. Reeves,
Yes.
Mr. Wallenzek,
Yes.
Mr. Zale,
Yes. Thank you, council. Resolution 21-22 passes by 7 yeas and 0 nays. Next item for consideration this evening is item 22, 2022, being presented by Michael G. Safarian and City Administrator Michael J. Beasley.
Mr. President, I'll start, Mr. Beasley will go on, you know, that we, like everybody else around, seem to have a little problem attracting employees. And if we do hope to attract them, we're gonna have to have a little higher pay scale to make it possible.
Mr. President, that sums it up. We did get Paul and Keith and their team looking at streets and cemeteries and get Tim and his team looking at rec and the jobs there. And we went back and forth and Tina worked with the groups and the finance shop worked as well. And we came up with a scale that I think is going to allow us to be competitive until we get into the seasons. We don't really know. But this is where the market is right now. And I think Tina enclosed the past schedule as well, get a sense of comparison, but this is where the market is. And among our challenges is that just the population cohort is just getting smaller in each one of these years and the age targets that we go in. And that's something we've got to adjust to as we look at it. There's fewer 18-year-olds than there were 2 years ago, 4 years ago, and 5 years ago. And this is where it is. You are aware of the big study we did. Paul's department and I, we really worked at it a long time, and we concluded it takes 18 years to grow an adult worker. So we got the calculators out and we did a big lengthy analysis. We're hoping they maybe get some federal funding
Yeah.
to count
Yeah.
those years up again if we can.
Thank you, Mr. Beasley. Council, or any other questions or comments? Hearing none, I will assign item 2022 or 2022 as ordinance 2022 and ask Ms. Evans to read it into the record.
Amending ordinance number 4 of 2021 by establishing a revised pay classification schedule for seasonal employees and declaring an emergency.
Mr. President,
Council,
Mr. President.
Mr. Wallenczak.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move for passage of ordinance number 22 of 2022 as an emergency measure.
Thank you, Mr. Wallenczak.
Second.
Second by Mr. Davish. Ms. Evans, would you take a roll of council, please?
Mr. Wallenczak,
Yes.
Mr. Davish,
Yes.
Mr. Drake,
Yes.
Mr. Horniak,
Yes.
Mrs. Pavloff,
Yes,
Mr. Reeves,
Yes.
Mr. Zale,
Yes. Thank you, council. Ordinance 2022 passes with 7 yeas and 0 nays. Next item will be item 2022, also presented by Mayor Michael J. Safarian and City Administrator Michael Beasley. Mayor?
Thank you, Mr. President and council. This is an annual thing to officially bring our codified ordinances up to everything we passed the year before. And you'll see it next year too,
Thank
and
you,
every year
Mr.
to follow.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Council, any other questions or comments? Hearing none, I will assign item 23-2022 as ordinance 23-2022 and ask Ms. Evans to read it in the record.
revising the codified ordinances of the City of Oregon by adopting current replacement pages, authorizing payment of $2,987.26 to the Walter H. Drain Company, 525 Vine Street, Suite 310, Cincinnati, Ohio, and declaring an emergency.
Council.
President.
Mr. Wallenczak.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, I move for passage of ordinance number 23 of 2022 as an emergency measure.
Thank you, Mr. Wallenczak.
Second.
Second by Mr. Davish. Ms. Evans, would you please take a vote of council, please?
Mr. Wallenczak?
Yes.
Mr. Davish?
Yes.
Mr. Drake?
Yes.
Mr. Horniak?
Yes.
Mrs. Pavloff?
yes,
Mr. Reeves?
Yes.
Mr. Zale?
Yes. Thank you, council. Ordinance 23-2022 passes by 7 yeas and 0 nays. Next item, also presented by Michael J. Safarian, Mayor, and City Administrator Michael G. Beasley, is item 24 of 2022.
Thank you, Mr. President, and I'll start, Mr. Beasley, add details. This is precisely one of the main reasons or objectives for having an economic development foundation, is so that we're able to work with prospective businesses without disclosing all their details. Otherwise, they wouldn't even consider dealing with us. That's the basis of having the foundation. Mr. Beasley get into some of the details of what we're actually doing here with our land.
Mr. President and members, just as the members note, a little bit more than 2 years ago, the city obtained a leasehold interest with an option and put after 10 years for the former Kmart site. We've worked through a kind of a pre-development phase. We had an unscheduled COVID interruption, but we're now at a stage where we're excited that we've had strong interest from developers for the site. Kind of the prerequisite step for us to start negotiating leases with potential tenants is to move the property to the foundation. Our goal here within a very short period of time is to kind of end the city's financial obligations and ownership of the parcel and have it assumed by a developer. Kind of the interim step is to turn that over to the foundation so they can do the negotiations. As the mayor noted, if the Steve Horniak Incorporated store was going to negotiate a lease, they don't want to have to see it in the paper, and the Tim Zale Incorporated store or Kathy Pavloff store is going to then, hey, wait a minute, how come you gave that to Steve? And that's something that developer works through in private, but they have to take the interim step of turning over to the foundation. All this does is the interim step of turning over the foundation. The foundation at some point will turn it over to a developer and move the city out of a financial obligation to it. long-term, our relationship with the site and our shaping of it won't be through the land control. It will be through the TIF instrument or tax abatement instruments and a development agreement with the developer. That is the important instrument that will come before this council, no matter who owns it, because it is the city alone that controls those tools to development, where the roadways go, water and sewer, et cetera. So we did this sort of thing already with the southern end of it, back to Pickle Road. We did it a couple of years ago, and we're building roadways and et cetera now. This is kind of the next step for the land to the north. And as people know, we're, the developers are in the kind of the due diligence phase now with several interested groups. So we're excited about until they're done. Nothing's done till it's done. But there's really strong interest. People want to be here. And there's some things I think the community has been looking for a long time. They're going to end up in this area. But the first step is to turn it over to the foundation, and then we'll move from there.
Thank you, Mr. Beasley. Council, any other questions or comments? Hearing none, I will assign item 24-2022 as ordinance 24-2022 and ask Ms. Evans to read it into the record.
Authorizing the mayor and finance director to enter into an agreement with the Oregon and the Bay Regional Economic Development Foundation to allow the city to assign its land lease interest to the Oregon Economic Development Foundation to market for development opportunities and declaring an emergency.
Council?
Mr. President.
Mr. Horniak.
Mr. President, I move for passage of ordinance 24 of 2022 as an emergency measure.
Thank you, Mr. Horniak.
Second.
Second by Mr. Davish. Thank you, Mr. Davish. Ms. Evans, would you take a vote of council?
Mr. Horniak?
Yes.
Mr. Davish?
Yes.
Mr. Drake?
Yes.
Mrs. Pollock?
Yes.
Mr. Reeves?
Yes.
Mr. Wallenzeck?
Yes.
Mr. Zale?
Yes. Thank you, council. Ordinance 24-2022 passes by 7 yeas and 0 nays. Next item up, council, is item 25-2022, being presented by Mayor Michael J. Safarian and Public Service Director Paul Roman. Mr. Roman? Oh,
Go ahead,
Mr.
I was just gonna start, and Mr. Roman can finalize this. But we saved the most exciting to second to last item on the agenda. This is something that Mr. Roman came here tonight.
Hey, I love
for.
this stuff.
Yeah, This,
It is fun.
this is pretty exciting. Yeah. That's all yours.
Okay.
Don't want to rain on your
No,
parade.
no, I appreciate that. Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, Mayor. And this ordinance is just to purchase a polymer for the wastewater treatment plant. It's used to dewater biosolids. I would say sludge, but biosolids. And we've experimented with different polymers. We feel that the this particular Clariflock polymer made by Polydyne is the best for our particular biosolids. But there is a sole vendor for that, and obviously we need an ordinance to purchase it. In looking at the unit price that's in Exhibit A, the price has gone up 15%, but that's over a 3-year period. And honestly, with everything else, it's still a fair price. So be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Roman. Council, any questions or comments? Hearing none, I will assign item 25-2022 as ordinance 25-2022 and ask Ms. Evans to read it into the record.
Authorizing the mayor, finance director, and director of public service to issue a purchase order to SNF Polydyne, 1 Chemical Plant Road, Riceboro, Georgia, for the purchase of Clariflock C6266, a dewatering polymer for the wastewater treatment plant, and declaring an emergency.
Council.
Mr. President,
Mr. Davish.
I move for passage of ordinance 25 of 2022 as emergency.
Thank you, Mr. Davish.
Second.
Second by Ms. Pauloff. Ms. Evans, will you take a vote of council, please?
Mr. Davish?
Yes.
Mrs. Pollock?
Yes.
Mr. Drake?
Yes.
Mr. Horniak?
Yes.
Mr. Reeves?
Yes.
Mr. Wallenzeck?
Yes.
Mr. Zale?
Yes. Thank you, council. Item 25, or I should say ordinance 25-2022 passes by 7 yeas and 0 nays. Next item, item 26-2022, also presented by Michael J. Safarian and Public Service Director Paul Roman.
Start, President, Council. This is the next step in the construction of our latest bike path. It's Mr. Roman could add some details, but it is what it is.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
So, Mr. President, this ordinance is really to hire a construction firm to watch over the administration and inspection. And GPI actually did the work for our Wheeling Street Bridge and our Yarrow Street Bridge replacement. Did a great job. I think when you get federal dollars like this from the federal highway, you certainly have to account for everything in terms of all the products, the inspections, and document it. And there is a little bit of red tape with that. And GPI has done a great job. We had 5 other firms submit qualifications, but we feel they are the best for this project. So that's it. Their scope of work is in Exhibit A, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Roman. Council, any questions or comments? Hearing none, I will assign item 26, 2022 as ordinance 26, 2022, and ask Ms. Evans to read it in the record.
Authorizing the mayor, finance director, and director of public service to enter into an agreement with Greenman Peterson Incorporated, 4125 Highlander Parkway, Suite 50, Richfield, Ohio, to provide professional construction administration and inspection services for the LUC Oregon Trail Bikeway Phase 4, PID 111544, in an amount not to exceed $42,620 and declaring an emergency.
Council,
Mr. President,
Mr. Davish.
I move for passage of ordinance of 26 of 2022 as emergency.
Thank you, Mr. Davish.
Second.
Second by Mr. Drake. Ms. Evans, you take a vote of council, please?
Mr. Davish?
Yes.
Mr. Drake?
Yes.
Mr. Horniak?
Yes.
Mrs. Pollock?
Yes.
Mr. Reeves?
Yes.
Mr. Wallenzeck?
Yes.
Mr. Zale?
Yes. Thank you, council. Ordinance 26, 2022 passes with 7 yeas and 0 nays. The next item we have for consideration this evening is a liquor permit transfer to S&G Stores LLC, DBA S&G 104, 3369 Navarre Avenue, Oregon, transfer from Barney's Convenience Mart Incorporated, 3369 Navarre Avenue, Oregon.
Mr. President,
Ms. Paula.
based on the information provided to me, I move to instruct the clerk to mark the box that we do not request a hearing at this time.
Thank you, Ms. Paula. Council?
Second.
Second by who?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Wallenzeck. Second by Mr. Wallenzeck. Yes. Any objections? We don't vote on it. No, correct. Okay. Thank you, council. That takes care of our liquor permit. Next, I'll move to the mayor's report. Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. President and council. I have you probably seen the correspondence for announcing a couple of employees announcing their retirement resignation. And so I'd first ask council's consideration in accepting the retirement resignation of Gene Schwartz effective March 31st, 2022. And once again, I'd ask council's concurrence in accepting Gene's desire to retire once again, March 31st, 2022.
Council.
Mr. President,
Mr. Davish.
I will concur with the mayor on the retirement of Gene Schwartz effective March
Thank you, Mr.
31st of 2022.
Thank you, Mr. Davish. Second by Ms. Pauloff. Council, any objections? Mr. Mayor, council concurs with you.
All right, thank you. And next, same thing, a retirement resignation from Cheryl Nisley, and her effective date is February 10th, 2022. And once again, I ask council's concurrence in the desires of Cheryl Nisley to retire February 10th, 2022.
Council?
Mr. President,
Mr. Davish.
I concur with the mayor of the retirement of Cheryl Nisley effective February 10th of 2022.
Thank you, Mr. Davish. Second by Mr. Horniak. Thank you, Mr. Horniak. Any objections, council?
And with that, Mr. President, I would conclude my report.
Okay, Mr. Beasley.
Mr. President, members, just a couple quick notes. A number of items that we discussed during the budget season were we're making some progress on. I just want to just give quick updates. Council President and I and a couple of others have been meeting regarding plans for a dog park. We're kind of excited about some of the opportunities that can develop. We're looking to develop a dog park on the land. Just a note for council again, immediately at Pickle Road, where kind of our recycling facility is now, south along the fence along 280 there on property belonging to the Y. And we're waiting for some back and forth with the Glass City Dog Park group, looking for some proposals, but there's some interest, and I think there's some room there. We'll take it. We're excited. Also on street lighting, we're working through we've got a couple of meetings scheduled in the next few weeks with groups. We are looking to convert all of the city's street lighting to LED, and in a way that'll achieve three things. It'll achieve a better night sky. It will achieve fewer burnouts, and so it's much less likely that you as council members will get calls from our constituents saying, how come my light's out and it takes a while to get it back on? And finally, it'll ultimately be a lower cost. We think we can accomplish this. Our goal is to probably choose a path that has a zero capital outlay. We'll phase in the savings over time because the bill will be less, so we won't write a check, but we'll achieve a savings over time. There's one, we're going to talk with First Energy, and there's also a private entity that done some of the cities as well. We'll talk to them both and look at some models, and we'll end up with legislation sometime in the next couple of months to try and get that done. And they get it done fairly quickly when you look at it. So other committees are doing that as well. Also, we're still working through a path with the aggregation coalition to end up with about 25% of our power from solar arrays for residential and small businesses with the rest of the communities in the area. It'll be among the largest solar packages for any group of residents. I just want to let folks know we're still working through that. We are we're out to bid now on some things with the aggregation coalition. There's some good paths going on. We're still kind of on the path on that, and it's going all right. The bike trails, Paul already mentioned. I meant to bring that up, and that's about it. That's enough stuff going on. So we got a few things happening. We've got a lot going on in the next couple of months, and we'll see where we are. Thanks. Oh, tomorrow night at the Plan Commission, I will be presenting on our new kind of softer industrial zoning. I won't rezone anything, but it will create that as a zoning category that's available in the future.
Thank you, Mr. Beasley. Mr. Pepora.
No report, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. Pepora. Mr. Roman.
Thank you, Mr. President. I just want to make a comment. Last week, we had, and all of you are aware that we had 5 water line breaks within a 3-day period. And it was difficult for, I'd say, the Park Place, Parkside Drive subdivision area. And I can tell you by Friday afternoon, our distribution crew was literally exhausted. And we were hurting. And Keith Henninger asked if the street department could assist. And I tell you what, I'm very proud of the street department. They definitely stepped up. They made a water line repair. It was still under the supervision of Keith Taylor, who was the acting supervisor. And, we followed through on everything else. But the street department, we had an HEO that worked for the distribution at one time. Even Keith Henninger had some experience with it. And we had other guys that had plumbing experience. And I'm very proud of, I'm proud of distribution too. And they do a lot of breaks, a lot of work, and in the middle of winter, it's very difficult. And but for the street department to step up, I was very proud of them. So that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Roman. Mr. Reeves.
Thank you, Mr. President. I was just gonna say the same thing, kudos to the water distribution department on the quick response to all of those water main breaks, plus our street department working with them and getting that taken care of. Also, kudos to our street department for the snow removal that we had last week, and driving in other jurisdictions that still aren't taken care of. It's really nice that our people take care of the streets real well here. And also, kudos to Mr. Roman and his staff for getting the info out about those water emergencies. And last but not least, with, Mr. Beasley, do you have any idea where we are with this? I know it's getting close to spring here with our golf cart ordinances that we had talked about, in the fall.
Mr. President, members, the bad news is we don't have a good answer. Remember, our conclusion was at the time was that state law allowed people to use carts in most of the places that they want to, if it's street legal. What we also concluded at the time is that we didn't think we had consensus to move forward in any one direction. So we felt like we ended up with, I think, 2 hearings on it. We left, I think, with more ambiguity than we began, is the best way I can summarize it. And I'll ask our law director, Melissa Verver, for any thoughts, but right now, it is my belief that any citizen with a street legal golf cart can ride it on any Oregon street other than the 35-mile-an-hour streets and lower right now. The challenge is there consensus? And we'll ask again, and we'll send a little survey out to members. Is there consensus for us to propose access for connection in some other streets? We floated that, but we didn't feel like we had majority support. We have a slightly different council now than when we had the discussions, and maybe we'll ask Mr. Drake, we'll collar you this week and ask your thoughts on it and see if we can see if there's consensus, or not even consensus, at least a majority to move in one particular direction. But it was one of the things that some members just were kind of divided on as to they didn't really know which way they wanted to go.
Thank you.
Mr.
Mr. President.
Reeves, just a quick comment on that. I think what really happened among council members was the more we tried to do it right, the more complicated it got. And I think that's really what happened. And we got to the point where we just said, you know what, let's just let the state law be the state law. Because like I said, the more we tried to make sure we did the right thing, it got more complicated.
Mr. President, I had one
Mr.
thing and when it started out in committee, it was to see if there was consensus to grant the right to be able to drive the golf carts on the road. And the way it turned out is that was already there. So it was going to be working the opposite. It was where you were going to prohibit it. So the right was already there.
Okay.
And so where would you limit? And it's just say, well, maybe we would try what, like Mr. Zale said, what the state law permitted, and then see if we had to work limitations as it started to get used.
Mr. President.
Mr. Reeves?
So with that all being said, as of right now, if it is street legal, titled, licensed, they can drive on any roads 35 miles an hour or below.
Correct.
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Reeves.
Mr. President.
Mr. Horniak?
Just a comment or I guess question on that is, considering that with the Ohio Revised Code allowing them on streets of 35 and under, some of the discussion through the committee hearing and even in I'll say one-on-one conversations was the ability of use into the bike paths around the city. I believe that is something that the city will have to address as we
They're
see
not
these
permitted in
becoming more.
there.
Correct.
Yeah.
But I don't know that we have that publicly known or have somehow shared that with the community that they are not permissible on those.
We have signs
That
that
would
say
be
no
simple.
motorized vehicles.
Yeah,
It does say no motorized
Yeah, we
vehicles
do.
on each
each
of them.
We do.
Okay, and,
Yep.
and is that as well as the bike paths that run along the street, say on Star Avenue? Are those also signed no motorized vehicles?
It used to be, I don't know. if
See,
it
I
was-
think.
That's a
I think
lane,
what
not
sign
a-
is really
that
the
was a
off-road
confusion.
path is
We
where
had
we
some-
have the signs, not so much the bike lanes on Star.
It does not, and
It
the
used
law
to
is not
say
the
that.
same on Star.
It may
I
be.
don't
It used to, and I don't
So
know if it got
it-
reincorporated on the letter.
Is that something that we as a
Right.
city need to address and identify, or does the Ohio Revised Code protect us well enough in their legal limitations?
Mr. President, also, we are going to look at the funding language for our grants that we received and see if there's restriction. Now, I'm certain I bike more than anyone here. I do 4,000 miles every year. I actually wouldn't mind sharing in some places. I think it could be okay. I know other cyclists think that that's a horrible idea. So I think in some ways it could be good for Oregon to try it in some places. We're thinking of maybe in the town center area, creating a space where we could try that in some way. Where we can have a share the trail system or call it a multi-use park pathway. It is not easy. Like every time you open this can, it gets murky. We will look at that again as we get close to come out of the winter again. We'll do a little session on it, with maybe Paul and Melissa and I again, and we'll just kind of get a sense of it. There might be some places where we try a model and see. I think it would be nice. I had a gentleman come in and see me again, late last week, and he just was, boy, I'd love to be able to get over to the rec here from, just the other side of St. Francis thing. He'd just love to be able to get here if he could. And if it's not easy, all right. We'll see
Thank
if
you,
we
Mr.
can do it.
Horniak.
Mr. President,
Mr. Reeves.
thank you. The other question I have is the people that have the bicycles that have the motors on them, once they get up to a certain, they can ride them like a motorcycle almost. Are they allowed on the bike path?
Mr. President?
Mr. Beasley.
Technically, in their motorized state, they're a motorized vehicle, all right, as I believe. And that I know that those vehicles operate on all the bike trails that I'm familiar with, though. They're quiet. I don't know whether they've got a motor going or not, all right? But people do it. In most instances, motorized vehicles are prohibited, and that falls into that category at some point. I can't tell whether they're motorized or not.
Thank you, Mr.
Thank
Beasley.
you.
Thank you, Mr. Reeves. Mr. Drake.
That was murky enough.
Thank you, Mr. Drake. Mr. Wallenczak. Thank you, Mr. Wallenczak. Mr. Davish.
No report, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. Davish. Ms. Paula.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd like to reiterate Terry's kudos to the Streets Department for the awesome job they had done during the weather. But I'd also like to give a kudos to fire and police. The feedback I've gotten during the storms that the police were helpful, calls were answered quickly with the fire department for the life squad, and just a lot of positive feedback out there about answering the call. So kudos to the police department and to the fire department for a really great job during that weather as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Paula. Mr. Horniak.
Just briefly, I'll kind of echo and ditto the sentiments earlier. The streets department, certainly through the snow event we had, were outstanding. And I will say, members of the community that reached out to me or that I talked to were above and beyond pleased with how the city of Oregon has done. And for everybody that didn't, if you traveled outside of the city of Oregon during that snow event or the day afterwards, you saw the difference between being in Oregon and being in another municipality around us. And also for stepping up in the water thing, and to Mr. Roman and his folks, as well as the whole water distribution group. It seemed like every time I was getting a text, we had another challenge to deal with through that. And again, I think it was handled very well, very professionally, and very well communicated to our residents and to our system. So thank you to everybody involved in all of those pieces, not only with the snow event, but also the always existing water line breaks that come in the wintertime. So appreciate everybody's involvement. And like I said, the overwhelming response I had from the community and members I've talked to have been extremely positive in both of those issues. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Horniak. And I have no business with my standing committee, although I will make a comment regarding everything everybody said is I feel the same way. But when we had the big snow, and it seems like every year I manage to get on a snowplow and ride around for a little while. And it's not an easy job. It's a lot more difficult than people think it is for these guys to go out there and plow that snow with those trucks. I mean, it's difficult. And they do a great job. That being said, I will seek a motion for adjournment.
Wait a minute.
Oh,
Oh,
you're correct. I'm sorry. Ms. Ackman, would you please step forward, state your name and address for the record, please?
I know, it's a holiday. Happy Valentine's Day, right? I'm taking a mulligan. Beth Ackerman, I guess I figure, why should I say this? 931 Berry Road, Oregon, Ohio. I wanted to ask Mr. Beasley or Mr. Safarian, Mayor Safarian, who is, I looked on the website, who is running the Oregon Economic Development Foundation at this time?
Right, at the current time, we don't have a director, so
The board
the
is,
board is running it.
Okay, because when you said about that, they would need.
they don't have a director now.
Well, I mean, who would do the negotiating? then?
It would be ultimately the board, their board leadership.
Oh, okay. Do you have candidates presently?
They have interviewed a number of candidates and they're going through that process now.
Thank you. I wanted to, last year was a rough year, right? And somebody even said to me, they said, that dealing with council is how I ended up like this. And they didn't know that I've been this way for 20 years. But anyway, I want to thank Mr. Drake for doing that and with the wetlands and bringing that forward and all of you and Kathy. And I look forward to working together instead of opposing. I really think one of the key reasons that so many people were set off last year was the use of the term easily mitigated in the, when our properties were put up for sale. Seeing that really misled a lot of people. Based on, I mean, a lot of you really have a good heart about wetlands and you really do see the value of conserving and creating. And I really think that language, really, I hate to say triggered, but easily mitigated. Just, it was like saying, hey, and you said it's not. It's, the goal is always mitigation's the last thing you do if it can be avoided at all. And so I really do think, though, that terminology when our property was for sale was created a lot of pain. And so I'm hoping we move past all that. Maybe it was just bad word choice. And from, you guys recognizing World Wetlands Day, and hopefully we can do an activities and we can really give Oregon the credit it's due and in the birding community and environmentally and in tourism. And I think it's a step in the right direction, and I'm really happy that you guys took that action. Yeah, that was it. I think there was just a lot of missteps last year that ended up creating a lot of grief. And I really, for one, don't want to live in a community that looks like a Jerry Springer episode. Some people do. Some people would like to see that. My pastor spent the last 2 weeks preaching directly at me about how to handle hostility and how to handle, how to be a peacemaker. And I felt like he was just honed in right on me for like 2 Sundays in a row. And I'm going to do my best to be a better citizen and be more to all of you, to work with you and not against you. And I think make a friendlier, mood here in Oregon, because I, for one, don't want to live on Maury Povich or whatever episodes every week. So everybody have a great Valentine's evening, what's left of it. And I thank you so much.
Thank you,
Very
Ms. Sackler.
encouraged.
Thank you.
Tim. Mr. President,
Mr. Horniak?
I'm assuming we have nobody else to speak based on the crowd. There's a lack of. Quick question for you, as Mrs. Ackerman brings up, and Paul had mentioned earlier as well, is getting people to experience and utilizing some of the wetlands that we have created, the East Moreland and we do the Earth Day where we do the garbage pickup, different departments, things of that nature. February 2nd might be a tough day as a recognized wetlands recognition day. But perhaps, as we're thinking about the events and activities of the city, there's a lot of people I think that would enjoy getting to know what that is. I have several neighbors who have told me many times they drive out of their way to see the wildflowers in the summer. Maybe that's another way that we can communicate that to the public or even create some kind of event day so people can get to know that. Because again, it's an untold secret in our city that we have available to us that a lot of people just don't know are there and that they can use them. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Horniak.
One of the reasons we got the grant out back is because of the rock population is constantly back there. So there is the education, it is the, we're bringing it right to this complex versus, like the Oregon flood relief, that's in our industrial area, the urban runoff is in one particular neighborhood. This is out back where you have kids playing. They're gonna see that. So I think it'll get them to recognize wetlands.
Mr. President,
Thank you, Mr. Roman.
Mr. President.
Ms. Paulo.
I don't know if Mr. Horniak said he didn't know why February 2nd was a good time to do it.
No, I said it'd be a difficult time to do an outdoor event on February 2nd for wetlands. It might be a little cold, a little weather
Right.
challenge for folks to come out and enjoy that. Some like it. Myself, I don't like the cold.
Well, the reason why February 2nd is because it's World Wetlands Day. That's
Understand.
World Wetlands
Understand.
Day, so, but that's been since 1971,
Right.
so.
But an event doesn't have to correspond to the day. Is I
right.
guess what I'm
But
saying.
that-
is
that's why
it-
they
It would
say
be
every
tough to get a
year,
crowd out on
right.
February 2nd. Not so hard to get them out maybe in May or June and the flowers aren't blooming and you have something great. Because, what really kind of triggered that, Mr. Ackerman, even prior to your comments was when you looked at the pictures of the flyover and you get to the end where it ends at Eastmoreland, I counted, I believe, 5 parking spaces. Those parking spaces are there for people to be able to park, to walk, to go to utilize that. Those are walking paths. They're supposed to be used. If we're not communicating that these things are available and they are for public enjoyment, we need to better communicate that.
We need to.
Yeah,
And
we
we're
just need to
developing
sell
that-
that a little bit.
that informational thing in our website and stuff. So we are developing that more every day. KT, our or what would you call him? Our IT, whatever director. He is very good at that and it's taken us places we haven't been before. So we have that ability that we just didn't have before.
I think it's a great opportunity for the city to Mr. Roman's point, is kind of share that experience with people in the public too. So thank you.
Thank you,
I'm
Mr.
sorry.
Horniak.
Before you adjourn, Beth,
If you guys could tell Don Nelson, there's some revolving stripes in your waterway. So while he's after the bases.
Sure.
I know, I'm just.
Thank you, Ms. Ackerman.
Mr. President, I just wanted to address some things that you said, Beth, and we really don't take things personally up here, but no matter what we do, if we didn't pursue different industrial and retail ventures, we're critiqued constantly. If we do, we're critiqued. So we try to offer any option we can to provide ample funding for the city, and then we see where it'll take us. So when you say that, like it got a little spirited at times. I think that's a nice way of putting it, but speaking for Mr. Beasley and myself, we listen. We do not take the things personally, but we still have a job to do, and so there still may be things that we bring up that you may love. There's things that we may bring up that you don't love so much, but yeah. So that's our job, and if we didn't do it, we simply wouldn't be doing our job.
Thank you, Mayor. Council, any other comments or questions? Hearing none, I will seek a movement for adjournment, please?
So moved, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. Reeves. Second by Mr. Davish. Anybody disagree? Any objections? Meeting is adjourned.
It is the best location for Valentine's night is always.
Have a good night,
I
Marv.
worry about it. I mean, I'm a biker. I'm a cyclist. I'm waiting to see what's the golf. I do.